Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the public hearing for the Planning and Zoning Commission for Tuesday, February 28th, 2023. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Tonight is a continued public hearing. We do have a notice. I'll turn to the secretary to read the notice.
To be published in the Journal Inquirer Thursday, February 16th and Thursday, February 23rd, 2023, South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, February 28th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the South Windsor Town Hall to consider the following. Number one, PZC sponsored text amendment. Remove section 1.4, residential moratorium on single family subdivision and special exception permits for housing. Modifications to multiple sections of the regulations affecting single family housing. Addition of section 2.24, inclusionary zoning requirements for percentages of affordable units in single-family and multifamily zones, and add affordability requirements and modifications to multiple sections of the regulations related to multifamily developments. Number two, PZC-sponsored subdivision text amendment. Add to definitions chapter 3, sections H, inclusionary zoning requirements, I, agricultural division, J, first cut, K, lot line revisions, Chapter 4, modify section B and C with minor changes related to landscaping and sidewalk requirements. Add appendix B regarding street trees. Number 3, PZC-sponsored PZC-sponsored zoning text amendment. Extend for 4 months section 1.4 residential moratorium on single-family subdivision and special exception permits for housing. Copies of the application are on file in the office of the town clerk and/or planning department and online at https://www.southwindsorct.gov, planning department pages, planning and zoning commission applications. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard and written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at 860-644-2511, extension 2329, Bart Pasiconis, Chairman, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you very much. Our order of business tonight will be to discuss each text amendment. We'll turn to staff, and then we will hear from members of the public, first those in favor and then those against or having questions or concerns. Then we'll hear from commissioners. If anyone has a cell phone, if they could please turn it to vibrate or shut it off, we would appreciate it. And we do have a new intercom or audio equipment system. So hopefully we won't have any feedback like we haven't had in the past with the previous system. So at this time, since the Planning and Zoning is the sponsor of this text amendment, I'll just turn to our town planner to see if she has anything she'd like to say at this time. If not, we can get right into it.
Just briefly, just to let the commission know, you did receive from me copies of the proposed text amendments, both the zoning and the subdivision. What I tried to do is take all the comments we had at our last public hearing and try to make some sense out of them for you, kind of where we had questions that we were asked to take a look at the regulations, some wording that had been offered to us that seemed like stuff you might want to adopt. So I tried to give you some head start, if you will, on some changes to the regulations. The only thing we have in addition tonight is we're hearing the zoning text amendment to extend the moratorium for 4 months. As you recall, we decided we would put this out there so that in the event we decided we needed some extra time, we weren't finished with our work, we would have like a fall gap so that we would have an ability to extend it if we want to do it. We did notice CROG as required, so I just want to put on the record the CROG referral report for that particular text amendment. So this is dated January 20th, 2023, and it says, the Stafford Regional Planning Commission of the Capital Region Council of Government has reviewed this zoning referral and finds no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or the concerns of neighboring towns. That's all I have at this time. I'd be glad to answer any questions as we go through the evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe we did have one communication as part of our package that we could read into the record.
So this is an email with a very long report. I'll read the email. We do have
The author of the report is in the audience. I don't know if
Okay.
he wants you to read it all, or if you're going to summarize it, Don, or
Do you want to go that way?
how you
or
want
what do you want to do?
We'll invite him up.
Okay.
Excuse me, there's a button to push on your mic? Okay,
Thanks.
awesome, thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Donald Poland. I am with the firm of Goman York Property Advisors. We are based at 111 Founders Plaza, East Hartford, Connecticut. If you want, I can do a short presentation of the memo so you don't have to read it into the record.
Sure,
And it's in regard to the text amendment ultimately related to assisted living facilities and independent living facilities. As noted in a letter, I believe, previously at the first hearing 2 weeks ago from attorney Chris Smith, I am here in association with Chris Smith and with the owners of Evergreen Walk. That is who my client is, just for the record. So I was asked to take a look at this proposed amendment and to provide expert testimony related to it. So first off, I want to congratulate you guys and applaud you on your efforts related to affordable housing, the completion of your affordable housing plan and your codification of that plan into your zoning regs. I've worked on 7 of these plans for municipalities and have done the data research for an 8th community, so I know what goes into these. At the end of the day, you guys have 6.8% of your housing as affordable housing. That's actually for community of your character. That's actually not an awful number, but it's below the 10% state threshold under 8-30G. Anything you require in excess of that number, or excess of 7%, will ensure that you don't, go backwards in your affordable housing percent of total. I noticed in your amendments, not just the one on assisted living facilities and independent living facilities, but you're also doing similar amendments under the multifamily zone, the center overlay, the center north overlay, and the other overlay, the SAMUD. I'm not sure how you pronounce the acronym. For those facilities. What caught my attention in this while doing this review is ultimately that assisted living and independent living are actually very different than other market rate housing. And that is, one, the difference is noticeable just in your definition section of your zoning regs. You define them differently than you define other categories of housing. And that difference in definition is the substantial or robust amenities, packages, and services that have come along with them. And from my perspective, that sets them out as a different kind of housing than actual typical multifamily housing. That is, the fee for housing is actually a fee for housing plus additional services and amenities. So, from an age perspective, when we think about housing and we think about drivers, the primary drivers of housing are job creation, population growth, and household formations, and to a lesser degree, income. But assisted and independent living don't function under the same kind of market parameters as other categories of housing, like market rate multifamily. The fact is, the target audience, the 55 and older population for this housing, are already existing housing units. You have empty nesters who are downsizing and moving into whatever. So it's not the creation of a new household. It's not new population because they're typically already within the area. And for those who are 65 and older, the majority of this cohort, they're most likely no longer in the workforce. So it's not about job creation. So actually the primary driver for this kind of housing is actually age. And I show on page 2 that South Windsor is aging. You are on average older than the United States and older than Connecticut. And while I know going from 40.6 as a median age in Connecticut to 42.8 doesn't sound like a lot, in demographic terms, it actually is a substantial difference. On page 3, I provide 2 population pyramids which show the baby boom population in 2010, kind of in the 50, the back end of it is at the 50 to 54 age cohort. And then I show that moving up in 2021. Essentially, it's this large cohort of baby boomers who are aging that are creating demand for the independent and assisted living facilities. So it's age driving demand, not typical market factors. And therefore, from a market perspective, the price on this isn't really set from the intersection of supply and demand and scarcity. And it's scarcity of housing that's driving our affordability issue in Connecticut. It's actually age that's driving the demand on this housing. And you guys definitely have a need for it. You should be planning for it. You should be encouraging it. You should be allowing it, definitely. You need it. And you're also, and I say it in the last paragraph, you don't have to jump to that, but I ultimately say you guys are a great community for it in the sense that you have a robust kind of commercial amenities, offices, and so forth, the various services that such households would be looking for. The challenge here ultimately becomes, you know, the request for your proposal to have 15% of the housing units in this style of housing be affordable. And it's hard for me to say this in the sense that I truly do applaud your efforts at affordable housing, and I think it's great that you're codifying these into your regulations. It's just in this case, I believe they become very cumbersome and challenging. A household going into independent living or assisted living is typically already coming out of another household. The target market on the independent side is typically empty nesters. They have a house that they sell, that they're selling. When we think about how the census counts income or how we file our taxes for income, and when we look at, and we'll look at it on another page, when we look at the median household income and then what is 80% AMI, as your affordable housing plan says, it's around 72,000 is 80% AMI in income. So let me use my mom as an example. She's 83 years old. She has Social Security that runs about 22 grand per year. She has a small pension on my father's side that runs probably another like 10, 15 grand. And she has interest earnings off of, you know, 401ks and so forth. She qualifies well below 80% AMI. She qualifies at like 34% AMI. Now a little higher than that, probably 40. But my point being is she has the 401k. She has a substantial amount of money in a savings account. That net wealth isn't counted here. And actually, there's been this argument has been used against 8-30G, especially down in Fairfield County, that because your income as recorded via taxes and as measured by the census doesn't account for kind of how wealthy you are as a household, that there's this gaming of the system with it. So my first comment is, I'm not sure that the same level of need is actually existing within the cohort that's targeted for this housing. So your housing plan does a great job. It has 2 tables that shows what is the household size and what is 80% AMI. It then shows how that converts to a studio through 4-bedroom unit based on number of persons and what that works out to for an 80% AMI rent. And that's great. I actually love how your plan lays that out. However, I add an additional table on table 4 here. On page 5 here, it's table 4, where I basically provide how those affordable rents relate to market rate rents. And in the last column, you can see the loss of, say, on a studio unit, $282 in monthly rent for the affordability, or nearly $3,400 per year per unit. So then my narrative below table 4 then, and going on to the next page, ultimately explains, I do a hypothetical 200 unit, half are 1 bedrooms, half are 2 bedrooms. The one with a 15% affordability requirement loses nearly $190,000 in operating income based on the affordability component. And this is the challenge that every multifamily developer is confronted with, is that the way we have this system set up, that the burden rests on the development to be able to shoulder and support the affordability requirement. I'm not saying that's inherently bad or anything, it is what it is. That's where the burden ends up lying because the state's not subsidizing this, right? But on these assisted and independent living, there's more robust amenities. There's larger common areas for congregation. Your independent living definition requires a level of food service, which requires, food preparation. So there's costs related to the construction of common areas that don't generate rent revenues. And there are additional expenses on the operations and maintenance sides related to these. So they become more challenging to make them pencil out from a financial perspective. So I then, in the second paragraph on page 6, I explain that, on a 200-unit development, probably 50 to 60% of the total income generated once it's constructed is going to debt service, and 35 to 40% is actually going to operations. That only leaves approximately 7% on the margins for contingency and ultimately for profits. The fact is that $188,000 of lost rents captures 4% of the total income. It captures more than half of that 7% that's left over. And I'm doing that with just a market rate development. If you then apply that to the more robust amenities packages on the independent and assisted living, you ultimately end up with a very challenging financial feasibility. So my testimony here is really, I really don't think you should include this category of housing in these amendments. I'm fully supportive of your other amendment proposals, the multifamily district, the center overlay districts in that special district. Those make sense to me. I still think 15% is challenging, but I think it's reasonable. It's not 8-30G and 30% and 60% AMI, which I think is unreasonable. I think at 15%, you can probably make this work and go for it. But this class of housing, I just think it's really challenging. And I think you risk one of two things. Either A, it undermining financial feasibility in this type of housing not being built, which means South Windsor ends up not providing it. I think as of right now, you guys have 4 or 5 assisted facilities and 1 independent in town. The demographics show you could definitely support more. The second scenario I mentioned near my closing is that these developments do attract equity, do get built, but are really functioning on the margins. And you end up with kind of a handicapped development from the get-go that ends up cutting costs, deferring maintenance, and is not operated to the degree that it should be. So I just truly think this is a challenging area of the housing market to attach affordability to. I'll stop there so I don't bore you, but I strongly encourage you to ask me questions if you have them. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'll turn to the public. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on our first sponsored text amendment? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none, is there anyone who would like to speak against or have questions or concerns they'd like to bring forward? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none, we'll turn to commissioners. Commissioner Cavagnero.
Thank you. I'm still analyzing some of my thoughts, but I do have one quick question for Mr. Poland. I'm actually quite curious, looking at the regulations that you mentioned. I think I'll come up with more questions as we go on in the next 10 or 15 minutes, but I'm just curious if you know, your basis on this, is it based off of what other municipalities have done in Connecticut? I'm just curious if, you know, we're not the first case that we're trying to make, you know, these regulations affordable. I'm just curious if you've seen other municipalities go down a similar route and sort of a similar outcome from what you're describing.
Yeah, so a couple comments. Just once again, Don Poland for the record. One is we're in a unique period here right now. The 8-30J Affordable Housing Plan has really forced municipalities to start thinking about this and start thinking about it differently than we previously have. So I think we're seeing more activity right now than we have seen long-term in the past. I can say, I'll be honest, I can't think of an actual zoning provision related to assisted and independent living with an affordability requirement specifically. I've seen the affordability requirements attached to either elderly or age restricted. You guys, I believe, have a provision for elderly housing within your regulations, where it's market rate housing that has an age restriction on it. And that, you know, essentially functions no different than just a market rate apartment with no age restriction. It's this category where there's the more robust requirements that I see as unique and different. So my general feeling is, and having looked at dozens and dozens of regs, I haven't seen such a provision on this class of housing in other communities. Could it exist out there? Yes, I haven't come across it.
All right, thank you. Like I said, I'll probably have more questions in the next 15 minutes or so. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Viteri.
Mr. Poland, I'm sorry, I should have waved and said, wait, don't sit, don't sit. First of all, thank you for all the work that you put into this. It's very impressive. If I do my math right, because we're going to be penalized as a town for anything under 10% total, instead of going to zero, if we were to back off from 15% to 10%, then instead of the $188,000 penalty, if I'm doing my quick math right, it'd be about $123,000 or $124,000 penalty, which would still leave about a $200,000 net profit. To me, then, at least we're not losing ground toward the 10%. And I think, you know, I don't know how everybody looks at the finances, but to me, that seems to be a little bit more palatable to do it as a project. Just, does that make sense?
Yeah, so two-part answer. Yes, and anything less than 15%, I would agree, is going to improve the financial feasibility of the development. So my general feeling would be, or my general answer to your question is, yes, anything less than 15% that you can do, I support as being better. My opinion is I wouldn't do it. But that. Number two is also just on the count with the Department of Housing, and I believe Michelle had received comment from Michael Santorum at DECD, or Department of Housing. as to how these are counted. It's likely that assisted living facilities, on the way mailboxes are, that it's a single address and distributed internally, falls into group housing, like a convalescent home would, whereas the independent living facilities would most likely be counted as typical housing is. So you will lose count on one side, you may not lose count on the other side. Yep.
Okay, Commissioner LeBlanc.
Thank you. I don't have anything right now. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Foley. Okay, Commissioner Wagner.
Since we've been talking to Attorney Poland, if you wouldn't mind, is it attorney?
Doctor.
Doctor, okay. Yeah, I see all the different alphabet you have after your name. Thank you. The alternative that we've used in other locations is to use, and I'm thinking of the developments with very large houses becoming very difficult to put an affordable unit in there, was to use a fee in lieu of type of formula that I think might, I mean, I appreciate Commissioner Vitteri's option, but that's another option that I'd like to hear your opinion of.
Yeah, in general, for the record, I've recommended to communities in my working on affordable housing plans, the establishment of a housing trust fund and the creation of a fee in lieu of affordable housing, and that if affordable housing can't be provided, that a fee be paid in lieu of into the trust fund that's then used by the municipality to support affordable housing. So I am supportive of that concept. At the end of the day, it becomes very tricky on what is the fee and how much is the fee. The higher the fee, the more you verge into the same concerns that I referenced here of that number has to be, calculated in the cost of the development and so forth. Now, being a fee paid before CO, it's on the front end of construction. It's not gonna persist forever on the back end of operations, but it is gonna be captured within the debt service of the development. So I think it's plausible to do. I would just be cautious if that's the route that you went, as to not having an overburdensome fee that undermines financial feasibility.
I think I'd also like you to expand a little bit on a comment you made about a difference between assisted living and, what's the right term, independent living. And I understand the difference in terms of how they operate and what they do, but you made a comment regarding the applicability of one type of housing to our count, what's being counted and what's not being counted.
Right. So the question was asked on these, the question was asked by your staff, and I'm paraphrasing here, don't quote me, to the Department of Housing, the staff person that oversees the 8-30G list and how these things are calculated, as to whether or not assisted and independent living facilities, if they weren't affordable, would they hurt you on your affordability account? So remember, so I said you have 6.8, or the state says you have 6.83% of your housing is qualified affordable. That 6.881% is the percent of your total number of housing units. So the question is, how are these kinds of housing units counted? The census differentiates between what are group housing or institutional housing, so prisoners in prison, they're housed in a location, but they're not counted as housing units. Persons in a nursing home are housed in a location, but they're not counted as housing units. And the differentiation is the mailboxes. Does the person have an individual mailbox, or is there a joint mailbox to the location that then distributes the mail internally? And the opinion given by the Department of Housing was that there's a good likelihood that an assisted living facility would fall in the group category, and those units would not work into the mathematical equation of your percent total. But for the independent living facilities, those would more likely be individual mailboxes and therefore counted as typical housing units.
So the way to use that information would be not to apply this to the assisted living, and then maybe use a fee in lieu of for the independent living. We have what? I think we have a total of maybe 270 independent units. Some of them have been built and some of them haven't, about half of each, I guess. So that would be a relatively small impact. We'd get the fee from them that would help us with our overall housing, but not make them financially unfeasible. I personally would look forward to having more independent living in this town, just because of my own personal age and situation, okay? But I can understand that other people do need affordable housing, so I think maybe that's a compromise that would work.
I think that's a plausible alternative at your discretion. My opinion still holds of not applying the affordability requirements to this category, but I think your line of thought has validity. So.
Well, thank you very much. I think your report was compelling. I have other questions going through the items. Do we want to finish discussing this, or should I start going through the regulation with Lou?
It's the commissioner's choice. I know if we didn't get to that point, I was going to do that myself, so by all means.
Okay, thank you. So I'm looking now.
Steve, just before you start, I just want to make sure you're looking through the right document and that all the other commissioners are following along with the correct document.
So I'm looking at the one that's titled Zoning Regulations Proposed Changes, and it starts with remove section 1.4.
Okay?
And now I'm on page 2. It's on section 2.8, the text in red, very minor change. I would put a period after frontages and say the nicest looking side of any fence, if it has one, shall face the neighbor or the roadway as applicable.
I didn't hear that too well. I just
Just
want
change the fence to any fence, and because a lot of people have different fences all around the yard.
Okay, any fence versus the in second page.
Yeah.
The nicer looking side of any fence versus the fence. Okay,
Just a couple lines down, and this comes up in a couple places, but it talks about new housing units created, and I assume that's after a certain date, and there are places. So
this is the heading for 2.24 inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, that would be dates of the adoption would be, where we have a blank date, the date of the adoption would be inserted into it.
I'm not worried about the date, I'm worried about the word created. It seems very vague, when is a development created? And I'm
When you
thinking maybe we
approve-
want to be approved or something like that.
Okay, yeah, we could put, we could put approved on the land records. I mean, that's when it's really created, is when it's put on the land record.
Okay.
And just so everyone is clear, any thing possibly in purple is recommended or suggested by legal.
Okay. Now I'm looking on page 3, section 2.24.3. I'm a little concerned that someone could qualify to buy a house at an affordable price and then rent it out. Many people have to rent their house out for any number of reasons, would rent it out at market rate. So I know the definition of affordable housing seems to cover that, but I guess I'd like somewhere in here to indicate that any rent on a house which is purchased as affordable housing meet the requirements for affordable housing rents.
Yeah, that is usually in the affordability plan, because it is a requirement, but we can certainly reinforce it in the language here. And it also may be something that when we get to an annual, sending out and having people reaffirm that they're still in the house, we can verify that it's not rented at that point as well.
Okay, but I guess I would like to
Okay.
add that in there somewhere. Now, A1, 2243A1, that same paragraph. Both paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 say the may make payment and may set aside a reasonable number of lots, but there's no shall in there anywhere. I understand that they got an option, but, I need to kind of work it.
So that came from the legal opinion when we first sent it off to the town attorney. He suggested that the commission may want the option of allowing payment or a unit when we're talking about subdivisions.
Right.
So this was kind of drafted following that language. I think we also heard some testimony from some of the public at our last public hearing that maybe we don't want to get units as part of subdivisions. Maybe payment is what we really should be gearing it towards.
Yeah,
So I think as you folks decide how you want to go, if you're not going to allow units under subdivisions, anything referencing it would get stricken.
Okay, that actually isn't my point, okay?
Okay, well, it's a decision you
It
need
seems
to make.
like a builder could say, well, I may do this or I may do that, but I don't have to do either one. So somehow structure some language that makes sure they do something.
One or the other. Okay.
Yeah. Likewise, on section B of the same, the word may appears.
So Steve, if you go back to 2.24.2, under applicability, that's where your shall comes in, and it requires you to do affordable units or payment. So right up front, we have that.
Give me the number again.
2.24.2, it says it shall apply to all zones and developments, either affordable units or payment.
So in the applicability of 2.24.2,
Correct. So that's where the requirement of the shall comes into.
which is the last paragraph on page 2.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
You do have it required.
Maybe just an or at the end of number 1, or I don't know. Where it says in paragraph B, section B, multifamily, paragraph 1, the last line, fractional units shall be rounded up to the nearest next higher whole number. But that includes developments with 2 units. So a 2-unit development has to come up with one affordable house, which I think was not what we intended.
2-unit development wouldn't be under these regulations.
Actually, I think it is, and I forget where I saw that.
3,
There's some places where it starts at 2. and
it
other
says the
places-
term multifamily is defined as a single property with 2 or more dwelling units.
Yeah. So that paragraph says 2 or more, and then we round it up.
Right. And again, okay.
Well, I don't know, we need to set what our policy really is there, but I'm a little concerned that that's not fair.
No, because the first sentence says, the zoning creation for or more multifamily units, and that's where the fractional unit would come into play.
Okay, well, then we got an inconsistent,
Or more is multifamily, but they're saying up above, only when there's 4 or more multifamily, that's where the pending level of affordability is.
That's where it has the word may, where it should.
Yeah, that I didn't understand.
well, I don't know whether that amounts to an inconsistency or just extra information.
Again, I think it goes back to whether or not you're going to give people an option of the either or. If you're going to require just a fee, then we'll take out anything that allows them to do a unit, correct, right? I think we talked about only doing that in subdivisions. In multifamily, we're looking for the units specifically, not the fee.
And we do get into that a little bit later in the regulations where we can address that decision.
So I guess that's a little bit confusing, if nothing else.
Then, at this point, I would just accept that as a comment, and we'll come back to it.
Sure. As a matter of fact, everything I'm saying is that. Again, in 2244, which is page 4,
Yep,
I made the same note about leasing of units that were purchased on an ownership basis, you know. So the owner needs to rent the place out, make sure the rent is consistent with the affordable category of the house. You talk about needing an affordable housing plan, and I'm thinking some of these very small developments, it might be, and this is just an aside, it might be good to have a boilerplate plan available.
We actually have one that one of our town attorneys a couple years ago helped worked on, so I kind of have one that I do give out, folks. to
Great.
Model, but we could, yeah.
And then there was a comment by, I guess it was Councilor Kozakowski, about how sometimes these units are not completed, but they get a certificate of occupancy at an earlier stage. So they may not have carpet, they may not have all the drywall up, but they can get a CO. I'm hoping we figure out some way to make sure that anybody who builds a unit completes it. Now, again, if we're not allowing these, we're only using fee in lieu of for single-family housing. I think the issue was just single-family housing, not multifamily or rental housing. But I don't know, Mark, if you have anything to add in that area. He's shaking his head no? Okay. But I think we need to, make sure that the houses are complete. Maybe before they can be sold, the other units can be sold or something like that. Is this where we have the senior SRDs? Okay. Let me just see if make sure I'm not skipping anything. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm not skipping anything in between. Okay. So, all right, so on page 25, there's a whole section introduced to senior residence development. And I thought we got a lot of very interesting feedback, a lot of helpful comments. But it strikes me that because of that, we need to do more work on this than we do on the rest of the regulation. So my thought would be to not include that in this regulation, but immediately, then we could approve this regulation, we could close a moratorium, and then we could immediately take up adding the SRD. This is something we're going to add. It's not something that somebody's going to do if we let the moratorium in. So my thought would be to separate this out, resolve it all later. Now, if you want, I can go through my comments, but as you can see, I've got scribbles all over it.
yep.
I don't know how other people feel, so I will leave it there if people want to get into that section.
I would like you to go through your comments,
Okay, all right.
because our timeframe, Steve, hopefully, we're able to close the public hearing tonight,
Yeah.
okay? And then we could possibly get into deliberations on March 7th.
Okay,
But we do need to get something in place, or extend our moratorium.
Okay.
And that's going to be something else that we talk about a little bit later tonight.
When we get into the deliberation, I might suggest that we
What-
pull this out.
Okay, what page are you on?
I'm still
so
on
everybody-
page 25,
Yep, top of 25?
page 25.
Yep.
Now, the other thing about senior resident development is it strikes me that we didn't put anything in the subdivision regulations that would parallel this like we did in everything else. So I guess I'm asking, why are
I'm
we not doing
confused
it?
what you mean. Senior residence developments are site plans, they're not subdivisions.
Not subdivision, okay, all right, thank you.
As is your design residence zone, it's a similar thing. They're site plans, they're not subdivisions.
Okay, okay, the bottom of that, page 25, section 7, 17.2, paragraph A. It seems to allow sidewalks to be only in some places. I think there should be sidewalks everywhere. If we need to make some accommodation on setbacks, because the setbacks are pretty small, sidewalks should be in the setback. But I think there ought to be a sidewalk everywhere, especially in the senior development. Okay, on the next page, 717.3, the last sentence, it talks about environmentally sensitive or open space land. And my only question is that included in the area that we're considering in all these discussions? Or do we need to add something?
Could you repeat your question? I didn't
Okay.
quite follow you.
The sentence reads, at the discretion of the commission, environmentally sensitive or open space land may be deeded to the town of South Windsor. After we deed it,
Right?
we reduce the area of the facility. So I just want to make sure that we're considering the whole property when we do the approval, and then after we deed part of it, they aren't
Correct.
non-conforming.
Correct, we would have to look at that, you're right.
Okay,
One example where you did do that was with Strawberry Fields, where
Mm-hmm.
the town got land afterwards. There was some trade-off that went on there. So there
But
is
I
some opportunity to do it, so.
I think that's great. On the same page, table 717.4A, there's a front yard of 50 feet. Somehow I thought that was in, and then there's a minimum front yard of 50 feet. Ignore that comment, okay. Okay, 717.5, personally, I would drop the caps. I don't see why we can't have larger SRDs. And the cumulative in town, I don't see the need for that. So I'll go with the public on that. On 717.6, density, the SRD shall not contain more than 20 residences or 25 if an on-site community room. And I think we had a public comment that, again, that could be bigger. I guess I'd like to hear some discussion about what does it do if we require a community center, it's only required with 20 residents, if I'm reading this correctly. Mr. Damali maybe could comment on, can we change, is that economically the right thing to do there?
We started with Windermere Court on the north
Just
side.
for the record,
Oh, for the record, Peter Damali, Resident Design Professionals, 21 Jeffrey Drive.
thank you.
We started with Windermere Court. A developer named Brian Edwards wanted to see what he could do right next to the senior center and the community center, so we started with that. And then he added on, after we went in for approval for garages, and then we started with multifamily, and we added on single and two-family units. and then eventually expanded. And the maximum was 20 units when we first designed the regulation, model after something we'd done in Plymouth, Connecticut. And attorneys ruled that you could have age-restricted housing, 55 and older. It was legal to do that. Then the interest was to go above 20 units, which is a small, very small development. And so we proposed there was concern at that time that the senior center was too small. We even were thinking about an addition that was going to go to referendum. I don't even think it went to referendum. We ended up relocating elements out of the community center, so we expanded the senior center. Most of the building now, the Charles Enos Community Center, is devoted to seniors. There's also a youth center in there, but it's mostly that. So that's no longer as great an issue, but it was an issue at that time. So the idea was, put in a community center there in each project that goes between 20 and 25 units, which is a considerable burden on it. And that will take the demand away from the town's senior center. That was the idea behind it. It's really not very cost effective. You put in a community building for only 25 units, it's pretty expensive per unit. Dr. Poland knows a lot more about that than I do. I don't know if you ever want to opine on it, but the idea, if you're going to require a community building, in multifamily developments and other developments, they tend to have a lot more than 25 units. If you think of, they call it Tempo 2 at Evergreen Walk, they put in a huge, 7,000 square foot building, but they have a lot of units there. You can spread it out over a lot. But when you're spreading it out over a few units, it gets to be expensive. We did one at South Windsor Woods, which was called Nutmeg Village when we first presented to the commission. We put in a community center in that, but you have 155 units, so you're spreading it out. When you're doing it over just 25 units, that's an exceptional burden on the development, and you're not going to get as many of them because of that. And the economics, I don't think, are there. So it's one reason we didn't get a lot of those. And we have a very small count of SRDs right now, very small. If you look, we have, 13 developments, I think, I'm guessing. Even though Strawberry Fields was done as a multifamily development, but we made it age-restricted because we wanted more units there. But that wasn't treated as an SRD. It's just a provision in it. But the commission accepted that, so we can go over the 25 units. We converted a barn, we're supposed to convert a barn. It ended up being unsavable, I guess. Second architect was brought in, and it's salvageable, and they ended up building a new building, but they have a little community center in there. That was 40 some odd units, 43, I think, and then it dropped down to 38 during that process. But I think if you're going to allow more units, and I think they're cost effective, they're net revenue generating for the community. We don't have to worry about any kids coming in the school system, stuff like that. The town should have, in terms of expenses with taxes and revenue, it's a big plus. So if we can get those in, and you can allow people who are in my age bracket to stay in the community and still, if they choose to, own their own home, which is what most of those are, I think you should try to accommodate them. But if you require a community center, anything above 20 units, I think it's an excessive burden, and I recommend it against that, or consideration to dropping that standard if you do it. Allow more units and allow, select a threshold. If you want to require a community center, make it a lot more than 25 units.
Where would you put that threshold?
Just throwing a number out, maybe 50 units.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the problems that seniors have is dealing with loneliness, and community centers, and I mean, these independent living facilities are fantastic for getting people to interact with each other. Any kind of single housing, I think, contributes to loneliness as an issue. I see the economics there and appreciate it, so I guess I would lean toward requiring it. I think maybe 50 is a better number. I do understand. I mean, it probably costs as much to build a community center as it does to build a house. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if we can entice Dr. Poland. He went to London, England to get his PhD, and he's an expert in that. I don't know if he could opine at all. I don't see him coming forward, but if you'd like that. But in terms of the economics of it, 50 is a better number than 20 by a lot, but I don't know how you approach it from an economics perspective. But I know we won't get as many of these developments if we want them. We won't get as many if we have a cap of 20 units without a community center.
Okay.
Because the cost of construction are too high these days.
Thank you. There was a suggestion, I'm looking now on page 27, highlighted in yellow. Suggestion was made to come up with incentives for the affordable requirement. I think my opinion is there's plenty of incentives in this SRD development already, just with the lot sizes and other considerations. I don't think we need more incentives. Architectural considerations, 717.7. I would like to see an emphasis on single-floor living. I don't know, some percentage, but I have a number of friends who are coping with multi-level housing that they have owned for many years, and suddenly now they have trouble getting upstairs to the bedroom. And you go over to, can't think of the place now, Berry Patch, and you see a lot of two-story housing there. I think there are a lot of seniors who really, really need single-floor housing, so I guess I'd like to see some requirement for a percentage of single-floor housing in these developments. And again, I guess probably increases the cost or reduces the number of units. I don't know if Mr. Damali or any of the others would like to comment on that.
He's not taking the bait. Are you referring to senior residence developments?
Yeah.
I agree with you. As you age, one-floor living is definitely a great thing. My mother went over to where a lot of people from South Windsor have gone, which is Deer Valley, over in Ellington, which is a great development, Santini development. Eric and his kids have done a great project over it. I've had family members living in there. My mother had a 2-bedroom unit, 2.5 baths, and she had a loft. You know, grandchildren come in, they can go up into the loft, you know, that type of thing. It could be a 1-bedroom with a loft. But they're not up there, up and down the stairs all the time for that. So there are a lot of different variations. I agree with you. As you get older, one-floor living is definitely a preferred approach. A lot of people I know, in fact, I've even considered doing it myself, trying to make our house, for the most part, one-floor living. Don't use the upstairs, only when the grandchildren come over, type of thing. But I would think, yeah, one-floor living, at least with a single bedroom on the first floor. And if you have a second one, you know, it's with grandkids or something like that. But I would think having at least one bedroom and full bath on the first floor is probably a pretty good idea for the most people, but not everybody who's 55, although the vast majority of people who go into these developments are much older than that. But the average person who's 55 doesn't really worry about the stairs, but when you start getting into 65, 70, 75, 80, it starts becoming a burden for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I like the idea of revising my comment around allowing single-floor living, but I understand you can't get all these square feet in if you make the whole unit a single floor. So the idea of having a requirement for a bedroom and a bathroom on the first floor and dining, you know, so that you can live there.
Yeah. I like it primarily because vast majority of people going into these are not 55. It's 65 and older,
Yeah.
maybe 70 and older for the most part.
If I may, Don Poland again for the record. I'd agree with Peter's last comment. I think in most cases, developers will favor the one-floor living. That said, capturing the square footage going up may be required. The bedroom and bathroom on the first floor requirement is probably better than restricting to just one-floor living. On your previous question, my apologies, I was doing a calculation while Peter answered the question, but on the cost, as he said, the more units you have, you're spreading the cost over lower units. So quick calculation of 1,000 square foot, you know, common building, right, activity space. Assume $250 a square foot for construction, that's $250,000. Spread over 20 units is $12,500 per unit. Spread over 50 units is $5,000 per unit. And you could kind of apply that. If it's 2,000 square feet, $250 a square foot. It's just, at the end of the day, the more units are gonna lessen the burden. Can you absorb 5,000 into a unit versus can you absorb 12,500? So,
Thank you.
thanks.
I guess the other alternative to single floor, there is some mention in here of multi-unit buildings, so you can accomplish single floor living by having an elevator in apartments. So that would be allowed in as well. Any final wording? There was a comment that we ought to increase the minimum square feet to 1,650. I think that's reasonable. That's paragraph D, 717.7, paragraph D. Okay. The public comment, just below that, the public comment to eliminate house size restrictions, we may want to build larger houses and not required to build smaller houses. I'm inclined to agree with that comment. 717.8. Just make sure we know what we mean by public passenger transportation. Uber and Lyft and taxis are not, maybe I'm thinking bus is really the only thing we're going to have, right? No trains or anything, right? So why don't we change that to buses? And then the idea of having a shelter, it says this, you have to have a shelter if there's public transportation, but the Transportation Commission is trying very hard to change the bus routes in town, so I would hate to have a bus route change and discover we can't put up a shelter. So I'm thinking the land where a shelter would go should be included in the plan. Obviously, you don't want to build a shelter if there's nothing going to stop there, but there ought to be, the land ought to be provided in the layout, in the site plan.
So would you be looking for some language to say that, something in the event that a future bus line may,
Right.
Because those things are typically, based on my past experience, are usually easements along the right-of-way to Connecticut Transit or whoever it is too. So I could add a sentence then to be here to capture that, I think.
Okay, now I'm on page 29, which is, I think we're done with SRDs at that point. This is family assisted housing and the MAHZ zone. Again, I'd like to see in paragraph 7222, paragraph A, add sidewalks. 7223, it talks about the width of the pavement. I know in some of our condo developments, the town does not provide snow plowing service because the roads are too narrow.
What was your comment? The town only plows public streets, so if it's a private street, the town will not plow it.
Okay, so these are private?
These are
even
private
if-
streets,
Even if the town decides to build one of these in the housing
Well, if the
authority?
town builds it, then it would be, still, unless it's a public road put in that's built to a town standard, they're usually going to be maintained by private
Okay,
contractors.
They have in the past given some type of benefit for that. Like, they'll give a credit to the development, which is the same amount, if I remember right from my history at Pleasant Hills, the same amount that the town would pay to have a certain amount plowed.
Yeah.
But-
Just to clarify, so in some of our developments, like Redfield off of Smith Street, Austin Circle is a public road, right? So that main artery is a public road. The town maintains that road. All the little cul-de-sacs off of that are private. So those are maintained privately. So you do have a couple developments out there where the town did take over town ownership, But that was in your DRZs. It's not allowed in any other of your multifamily zones.
Okay. Thank you. All right, this is just a nit on 7224 on page 30. Paragraph C talks about collector roads. Aren't there several different levels of roadway that, you know, different degrees of collectorness and?
There's major, there's
Major,
minor.
major, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Let's just make sure we cover everything we want there.
Okay, I'll double check that.
Okay, paragraph, page 31, 7228, building setbacks, down to paragraph D. I think there's a little bit of a typo in there. The word include properties include on the next, on the very last black line there, or on the black line. See what I'm saying?
Commercial properties include, yeah,
Right.
there's,
But I would also work into there somewhere independent living facilities. I think we need that, right? Or no?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the last part.
Well, it says, but not limited to commercial apartment communities and independent living facilities and assisted living facilities.
So what are you saying about that? You don't think
Well,
it's,
do we need to include in that list of things that it's include but not limited to, do we need to include independent living facilities, or is that covered by commercial apartment communities?
it could be covered by commercial. I mean, we could add it. I think commercial does cover it, but
Okay, well,
Yeah.
don't need any extra words if
No.
it covers it.
no, it
Okay.
is covered, yeah.
Again, the definition of the number of, oh, I'm sorry, page 32, the very top item, 72210,
thank you, Steve.
paragraph A. It talks about 1,000 feet to a bus stop in a couple places. Do we need to say as measured along a roadway, or can they be measuring it through the,
At least you do measure it along the right of way.
yeah, okay.
That's not by the crows flying, you mean?
I think there's at least one other place down below, paragraph B, sidewalks. Maybe that's less difficult there. And again, on page 33, it talks about bus shelters. I would have that same wording about the space for future bus shelter. So now I'm on page 34, and the definition of covered, lot coverage building.
Could you repeat that?
Okay,
Steve?
page 34, there's a bunch of definitions. One of them is lot coverage building.
Lot coverage building, 3/4 of the way down, yep.
Yep. Talks about expressed as a percentage of the lot. And it, with all the other talk about maybe it includes wetlands, maybe it doesn't, I think it might be good to clarify that the lot here includes the wetlands. This,
So the lot would be the total square footage of the lot?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right, now I'm on page 37. This is my last comment. Everyone's going to cheer now. The outdoor lighting guidelines on section 11.3C, appendix C.
11.3?
Yeah.
Yep.
I guess I would like it to specifically mention that lighting, illuminating signs is included in this. Lights for general illumination or illuminating of signs shall not shine on to whatever. Okay?
So you're talking about advertising signs, the lights of advertising signs?
Well, we approve all kinds of lighted signs over the years,
Yeah, we have another provision that already addresses that,
okay?
that says that it can't go beyond 10% of the sign if it's shining on the sign.
Yeah, I'm thinking that isn't good enough because there are signs now where you're driving down the road and you get,
You get hooded, you get blinded by them, yeah.
yeah, I mean,
All right, let me,
maybe they just plain, maybe, I mean, to me, we've allowed the pointing up lighting, which I think causes that problem. If it points down, it probably doesn't.
we may need to revisit that in our sign regulations,
Yeah,
not
okay.
necessarily right now.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Okay. Commissioner Dexter,
No additional questions.
Commissioner Carey.
My only comment is on that page 27, 7.17.7. Can you hear me okay?
27.
7.17.7, where we get down to D. And, you know, this is where we had some comments about size restriction. And then we were just talking about, you know, whether it should be 1 floor, 2 floors. And I just wonder if, you know, well, the 1 floor or 2 floors, I think that, you know, to some extent, we need to leave some of that up to the builder, you know? I mean, if we're requiring that it be 55 or plus, right? They're gonna build for that age group. I gotta tell you, I'm older than that. I'm not gonna say by how many years, but I refuse to sleep on the first floor, ever. Like, I just don't. So if I bought a house in a 55 plus, I would want a bedroom upstairs because I don't sleep on the first floor. It spooks me. That's just me, okay? But, so I think we should be careful how much we dictate architecture to builders. If we're requiring 55 plus, you know, we're not gonna have school kids. You know, so we don't have to worry about, well, are too many kids gonna live there? So I think we should let the builders know what people are buying. I don't know, just a thought. And same thing with the sizes. I think that, you know, we have to take into consideration that as people have moved away, you know, sometimes people have a little bit bigger house because when their kids come home, they stay overnight because they're further away. Like, your children are further away. So I just think we have to not be so specific, is all I'm saying. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Bernstein.
Dr. Poland, one more time.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, so with the acoustics in here, I sometimes struggle to catch everything, and I want to make sure I understood your presentation. I always learn something when I listen to you. So what I thought I heard was it's your recommendation that the affordability component be exempt from independent and assisted living facilities. Is that pretty accurate?
Correct.
And the reason is because the financial feasibility or lack of feasibility for developers?
The potential is greater for the lack of feasibility due to the added costs on construction and on operations and maintenance.
Okay, so I get that, and that's one piece. The other piece of it for me is the need, supply and demand, right? So do you perceive that there's the need for affordable facilities for people in this age bracket in the area of assisted and independent living?
So I feel there is a robust need for independent living and assisted living facilities that's driven by age. I feel that from a demand side, the target audience for both of these categories of housing, assisted and independent, I feel the target audience falls to a wealthier side of the income spectrum. So I think it is less likely to be targeting households of lesser means. But that being said, I think at the end of the day, the majority of populations 65 and older, or those who are retired and older, it's like 67 now, right, are more likely to qualify at 80% AMI than within the normal housing market. It's just due to the fact that once you hit that age, you're on a fixed income. And that income's not necessarily reflecting your wealth. So I'm not sure there's, in the way you phrase it, I'm not sure there's a greater or more substantial need in this category for affordability.
Okay, I tend to disagree, but I called you up because I want your perspective, so thank you.
Yep. If I could just add one more thing, and this is some of the background to me stating that. Your median household income in South Windsor is just shy of $127,000. You're a fairly wealthy community. Your family median household income is $143,000. Your married couple median household income is $153,000. And that's kind of the catch there. At the end of the day, especially in the independent living category, we're most likely talking, at least at the 55-year age threshold, we are talking empty nesters downsizing into an alternative. And when your median household income is at $153,000 on the married couples, and they're most likely the target audience for this housing, I think that shows you how this housing category kind of skews in a different direction than typical market housing. There's something different going on here. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go through the regulations for the zoning regs, same document that Steve went through, but I have a couple other questions or comments. On the third page, 224-3A subdivisions 1, the last sentence of this suggested language from legal, the commission may authorize a direct donation to another entity to support development of an affordable housing project elsewhere in South Windsor. I think that that should be dropped from the regulations. I think it would be a better place for that to be, would possibly be in a housing committee or fair housing committee. I think that might be a better place for it than here. I think it just makes more sense. The number 2 paragraph, I think we're going to end up eliminating that, so I'll come back to that later if I need to. On the 4th page, I just had a typo to clear up on in the middle of the page C. The 3rd line, it says Connecticut Department of Housing or if. So I think that just needs to be cleaned up a little, maybe the or the removed. Definitions, I'm going to keep going. On page 6, we had a question or a comment regarding number 3 at the top and the minimum required lot area in the new language and 2 times the lot depth of the underlying zone. And also on number 4, it says, and the 2 times required lot depth. I think a good settlement for that would be the suggestion of requiring 1.5 times the depth. Currently, I believe the depth that's required in that situation is only one time. So 1.5 would make it additional, but it wouldn't be as taxing as the 2 times. So I'm hoping everybody is comfortable with that. Okay. On the next page, number 7, 3.4.3 density requirements, B. We had a comment to allow for a higher density as well as allow more than 12 units per building to reach a greater affordability. Currently, 12 units in a building is a lot of units. And depending on how that is structured, that could be towering over adjacent properties. So I would be more in line to leave it as it is now. And if we had an application that came forward that the developer showed us that they really needed that, then to address it at that time. But at this time, I would tend to leave it as stated.
Hey, Bart, could we have the right to change that? Say if, I was thinking about what you're saying, if you had topography where you have something that's really towering over something that's lower next door. I mean,
Yep.
Could we be the judge of that in this commission?
That I'm not sure of. Michelle, what have we done to address that?
You'd wanting the ability to be able to allow 20 units, you'd put some kind of sliding scale in there that you would allow it up to a certain amount under circumstances.
Yeah, this allows us for decision-making, because sometimes, say you had a neighboring property next door where you're on higher topography than what you were proposing. I'm looking at Costco. I mean, it's different, but it's related, where it's actually done in a hall. Nobody complains about it. It has a low profile, and it fits. So say we're the opposite, and Costco is on top of a hill. Now, it's going to be a monstrosity, and you'll see it from across town. What I'm asking really is that, do we have the ability to make that judgment as a commission to limit the height of, say, a complex with more than 12 units? Like, say you go 4 stories and your neighboring properties are 2-story homes, then that 4-story, depending on the topography, is going to tower over them.
So I understand your question. I guess because of the way our zoning is structured, you've got several different answers. If it's a zone change, that someone's coming in and they want to put a zone change, like you're multifamily and they're going to put 4-story buildings and you don't think it's appropriate, you can deny it outright. I would suggest that our regulations be as clear as they can be as to what you want.
Right.
Because when you do things where you say that we might allow this, it creates uncertainty for a developer. And then they're not sure how they're designing it. So I guess I would more tend to say if you think a 12-unit building is most likely what we've seen and we want, if we have some developer come in, has some project that we think is really something we want and 12 units doesn't work for them, let them come in and talk to us about a text amendment.
Right. See, I'm looking at this as forced approval, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, so I think, short of it being a zone change, you have all the authority to deny zone changes. Other than that, if you're going to allow it by special exception, which we have like in our town center and some of the other areas, I think you just want to be clear as to what you want.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. As far as, there's been some talk about adding more 3-bedrooms than the current stated regulations or the currently proposed regulations. At this time, without getting into a big debate about it, I would rather get the regulations moved forward as presented. And then if, again, there's a developer that comes in that says they have to have something, we can look at addressing any changes through a text amendment at that time. Let's see, what else I have. Just on page 13, 5.711B, 2, subsection D. And it says insulation shall be provided between units as noise reduction measure. I think this is covered under the building requirements, but because insulation is between units is, I believe, mandatory. But I believe it's sound attenuative board, and I don't know if I have that term correct, but that's generally the board that's between like a double wall to deaden the sound. And that term should be in there corrected, whatever the correct term is, shall be provided between units, strike A, as an additional noise reduction measure. And if anybody has an issue with that, please speak up.
I guess I'm wondering if that isn't covered by the building code, because we've kind of tried to avoid getting into building code issues in the past.
Yeah, but it had been brought up someplace and somebody had put that in there. I mean, if we like, I mean, we could always strike the whole sentence, and I believe, and Michelle, maybe you want to check to see if that's covered by the building code?
Sure, I know I did check with the building official. There is something that's covered under there. We could either mimic the language, or why don't I come back and let you know exactly what's covered under that?
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
see, I'm looking at that part with like insulation and other means of noise mitigation. There's different ways to do it, but insulation's a primary use for that.
Yeah.
But there's other ways to do that.
Okay,
Well,
but,
you would typically have two separate frames, I mean, separate framing for the drywall.
Right, you do it by
and some-
design.
In
Yeah,
addition, you'd have a material in there. So the frame doesn't transmit the sound.
well, the framing and even the sheetrock you use on, there's porous types that absorb a little more, and you hear less noise. Hotels tend to use that now.
I mean, you could get into how many decibels a reduction you get from the noise mitigation. But you can check with the building official.
yep, and just for the record, that is on both the center core overlay zone, which is on page 12, and page 13, which is the center north overlay zone. So just so whatever we decide needs to be done, we do it in both places. Okay. I'll get into the assisted living, page 18, independent living facilities. I understand what Dr. Poulin was talking about regarding the independent and the assisted livings. But the state of Connecticut, as far as the independent living, state of Connecticut still it counts those against us if we don't have any progress, any affordable, any inclusionary zoning in these. So I don't know how we cannot include them if we are able. And I'll refer to the letter from Alter and Pearson, attorney Chris Smith. And the letter states that Evergreen Walk respectfully requests that the commission reconsider or consider reducing the proposed require affordable unit requirement in these two unique housing communities from the proposed 15% to 10%, as Commissioner Viteri had mentioned earlier. And he goes on to say, this will encourage the development of both uses with an important affordable housing component. And he goes on to have some suggested redlined regulations in the, to be included, which I believe mirror what we are proposing, but just at a different percent. So I understand the concern also about the assisted living, but if I'm understanding it correctly, and the way that the assisted living are counted, and really that discussion with Mike Santoro, Director of the Office of Policy, Research and Housing, is under the comments on page 18, talking about the assisted livings in town and how they are counted as the group quarters. So it's not counted a 1-for-1. It's talking like 6 beds counted as one unit. So in independent living, it would be 1-for-1. Each bed or each unit that a person lives in, because it's independent of other units, would count against. But in assisted living, if you have 6 beds, that counts as one unit. So it's kind of a built-in reducer anyway. But I do understand, now my dad was in independent living for 2 years. I'm very familiar with it and the meals and everything else. And, they do have, or this particular facility had a large community room where everybody ate their meals every day. But other than that, and some activities that you might have similar, they had an activities director, but other than that, it was just like senior adult apartment living. With the assisted living, you do have the nurse care, which is skilled nursing. I know that costs money. You do have the meal preparation, everything else. You're really looking to take care of those people to the best of your ability, and they are probably people that definitely need these services. And it is at a higher cost. But, just referring back to the letter from Attorney Chris Smith, that's asking us to reduce it to 10%. And if they feel that this will work at 10%, and if the 15% is thought to be too taxing by the commissioners, then for the independent living, I would be in favor of dropping it back to the 10%. And, well, independent. The assisted, well, yeah. And I was thinking maybe going to 5% for the assisted living, but if we stick with the 10% that's in the letter, again, if a developer comes and they want to do an assisted living and they show us that they need something to be, make it economically feasible, then we can address that in the text amendment. But we're already seeing an applicant who's saying that they can do it with the 10%. So with both of them, I would just say the 10%, and that's what I'm recommending, and I hope everybody else is on board with that.
Before you move on, can
What's that?
I have a comment before you move on to other things?
Did you?
I was going to comment on the affordable part before you move on to other comments, just to keep this up, if you want to give me the floor for a second, otherwise, no.
Yeah, by all means.
So one thought occurred to me that in this independent living situation, some of the cost, some of the bill you get is rent, and some of the bill you get is for the food and services. And can it be structured, maybe Dr. Poland would answer, can it be structured in such a way that it's the rent that's affordable? And, you know, if you're providing meals, that's a restaurant service, that's not a rent service.
Again, for the record, Donald Poland. I think it's easier differentiated on the assisted living side, where there's more comprehensive packages of services. I think on the independent living side, it can become conflated depending on the operator. If they're just providing minimal services, like just say breakfast daily, that they may not actually break that out as a fee for service and it's included in the rent. So I just feel it may be a bit more challenging to address on that independent side, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Duplex dwelling units on page 19. And the number is 7.5.1 provisions. A, subletter 3, talks about the proposed language is lots for duplexes within the subdivision require 25% increase of the minimum lot size of the underlying zone. And we did have a comment from Capital Regional Council of Governments saying that they felt that that was against the area plan, and they just wanted to point that out to us. And I understand that thinking. I do understand that a duplex brings a lot of other factors to the lot and the community, but you have two different families. They might need more room. They might need more driveway space. So I would back down from the 25% and maybe refer to 10% more. Microphone, please.
Did CRAG give you a percentage that they were more accepting of?
Michelle, do you have the,
No, they didn't really. They just said that by requiring larger lots, you could impede affordability because more land was required. So they really didn't give us a recommendation. My comment to the planner previously was, you know, it's kind of a big step forward for us to allow duplexes in this kind of way. And so my thought process was, you know, we were opening up our duplexes in a different format. So that's how I kind of justified the increase in the lot size in my mind. But it certainly is your,
I would, there's no penalty for leaving it 25.
no, not at all. I think it was just a comment that they were making. I think overall, they were pleased with the kind of changes that you were doing related to affordability. I think they were just commenting that this could work in a negative way.
Yeah, I really see this as a necessity. That's just, I mean, I grew up in Manchester. We had duplexes in the neighborhood I grew up in. And you saw the difference in how,
I would stick.
yeah. I think this is a good idea.
you think Be specific, the
when you have-
25% or the 10?
Two
with
families
the
on the same
25%.
lot, a lot goes on. So an increase in the lot size, I would think would be warranted for something like that.
Of 25%.
Oh, yeah.
How do the other commissioners feel?
25.
25. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we stay with it.
Then I stand corrected, and I'll go with the 25 that, I'll remove my comment. Whoop, gone. Okay. On page 21, again, our suggested units per acre is 10 units per acre criteria. And there was a comment from the public that it does not apply. And I'm just wondering if that was for another, but I know staff has reviewed previous developments such as Flax Hill, Wapping Muse, and Metro Realty projects, and they met the requirement of 10 units per acre. So again, I would maybe step back and say, if there's a project that comes in and they say that 10 units per acre is an issue, then we'll address it at that time with a text amendment. But let's move forward. Okay, on page 26, talking about the caps. And this is regarding the SRDs and the cap of 25 units, 20 without a clubhouse, 25 with. If you looked at that spreadsheet of the SRDs, a lot of them were less than 20 units. A lot of it, I think, was dictated by the size of the parcel and these, a lot of times being fill-in developments of areas that might not have been able to have larger, I know there was some talk of 50 units cap. We have 15 developments with a total of 250 units right now. I would be in favor of raising the overall cap and say make it 300 or 350. But the individual cap per project, I would leave it as it is right now. And again, if a developer had an issue, they could come to us and talk to us. I don't think we have that much developable land where we're going to have a big issue with this.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
So I'm comfortable with the 25 per development. And, we can always revisit this as a text amendment, and it could even be sponsored by the town planning and zoning if we wanted to move it up to make it more affordable. But these are regulations that we had before, and we were able to build 15 developments with these regulations. Granted, there's going to be an affordability component in it now, but I'd say let's move forward, raise the overall cap. Well, right now, it's listed on our proposed regulations as 250 scratched out, which it currently is at 250, and it's written in as 350.
You know what, it seems to work, and that almost, I'm thinking compromise, but that's me. I'm thinking 275 or 300, but that's me.
Well, our proposed language is 350.
Okay.
So
So potential of 4 25-unit developments.
could maybe tilt your microphone down just a little.
Just doing some math.
Okay,
Potential of 4 25-unit developments in town,
right, 4 additional, yes.
or additional.
Okay.
Commissioner Foley?
Anything that's above and beyond the 25 units, I would recommend that they do have a community, 1,000 square foot facility with kitchen and bathroom.
Well,
If you come in, oh, well, no, I guess that doesn't
right
apply
now,
to
it's
this.
talking above 20 units or more, I believe, is the threshold for the community center. Once we apply the affordability component to it, we could hear back from developers who have, and, you know, at that time, we've always been aware of our developers' needs when they come to town. So I don't think that's anything new. We're going to try and do what's best for the community. So I'm in favor of leaving everything as is and bringing the cap up to 350 as our proposed language does. The overall cap.
I guess personally, I don't see the need for the 25 limit. I mean, if we got 2 50-unit developments or 4 25-unit developments, what's the difference?
That's where my comment is, if you come in over 25, you're gonna.
Microphone, please.
So to your comment, Steve, like you were talking about earlier, there's a lot of people that are lonely, like they want a community center close by. If you're gonna boost it to 50, then you will be required to have a community center built into the, which I think at this point, we don't wanna get into that. I think regarding this is about the affordability. So if we keep it smaller communities, I don't know, that's just my opinion. If somebody's gonna come in for 50, they're gonna come in and it will be regulated that they have a community center built into it. If you wanna go that route. But that's where I'm saying, is if it's gonna be that kind of that's a big area. You know, now we're talking like the Villages and, you know, nothing like that in Florida, but you need to give them a facility.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, let's go with what we have proposed, and we can always make additional changes to that, but let's get it moving. As far as addressing a cap of 50, those things can be done in the future, and I'm willing to look at that in the future, and raising the cap that you need a community center. You know, maybe the number is 25 units or 30 units, make it more affordable but I don't want to get tangled up in the weeds right now. I'd like to get it back in the regulations. And if a developer that has been working already on SRDs in the past wants to move forward with something that is allowable under the proposed regulations, they can do that. And then, you know, if there's a developer that needs additional or higher caps, then let's talk about raising it. But right now, with the time constraints that we got, I'm satisfied with moving it forward as proposed. Commissioner Carey?
So the only thing I would suggest is, because we did add the affordability to it, should we strike the, if it's 25 residents, it has to have the community center? Just straight that language, because we're saying the cap's 25. We've added affordability to it, so we've added a little more cost to it. So should we just strike that line?
So what you're saying is allow 25 units without a community
Yes,
center?
And then if somebody wanted more than that, or you're dealing with a special exception, then we kind of expect the community center, but just.
Well, we would still have to do a text amendment to allow more than that if we just have 25. I still think that's getting into the weeds.
Well, we just decide to do it or not right now.
What was that, Steve? I'm sorry.
I said, let's just decide to do it if that's what we want right now. We don't, I mean, this doesn't require a year.
Commissioners, what's your pleasure? Okay. We'll move on. There was talks about the size of the units, and we did have a developer here or a contractor of developer, who talked about bigger units for the SRDs. And again, I'm going to be a proponent of moving forward with the language that we have. And if somebody wants to do a text amendment in the future, we'll address it in the future. But a maximum unit size of 2,000 square feet is a big unit. I lived in a 1,300 square foot condo. It was a two-bedroom, one very large bedroom. The second bedroom was 12 by 15. That's a good sized unit for an elderly couple. Again, I'd like to move forward.
Yeah, I think that works. I grew up in a house that was 875 square feet with 5 of us, so.
Yep. Okay.
I know there's a couple of units in Eagle Run that are a little over 2,000 square feet, but, you know, I don't think that matters for here. It seems like that would be the biggest ones that are there. So-
Right.
And it's only like 25 or 50 feet over, so I think you should be fine.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're requiring 30% of the units to be 1,400 square feet. Do we really need to require that?
But with that 30%, up to 30% of the units could be 2,000 square feet also.
Well, 70% could be,
Pardon me?
so 30% could be above 1,800. 30% have to be 1,400 or less. I don't know, to me, that's just getting too complicated.
Well, I believe that's what we had before. And it worked. So, again, this is something we have heard that we want to move forward, and we're trying to get to that point. I think the majority of us want to move forward with what we have. And then, you know, if changes need to be made in the future, we'll do it, or we'll consider them at least, you know?
The need is there, the developers can get it done. I mean, it's.
Okay. Steve, you made a comment about single floor for seniors, and I'm of that mentality that I would love to see more single floor living, and to have that ability. But you mentioned Berry Patch, and a lot of the units at Berry Patch might be 2 floors, but the lower floor is 1 unit. The upper floor, you approach from another access point, and it can be a handicapped type or ADA compliant unit.
Well, I mean, I even like the idea of having a, spare bedroom upstairs, or, of course, it makes it hard to allocate the space because the upstairs is going to be the same size as the downstairs. But I would think a certain percentage really need to be able to live on the first floor, put the grandkids upstairs when they visit. But I don't know about all of Berry Patch. I think there are units there that are literally 2 stories.
Yeah, I know a lot of these projects, and I just drove through Shady Brook, which is Bailey Circle, and I believe all of those are single-floor living. I think the developers have realized that most seniors want single-floor living. So I think we're going in the right direction. I just wanted to point that out about Berry Patch. Okay.
So did we decide not to say anything about that
On what?
in the regulation?
I don't know how we could address that. I think it's a item that's driven a lot by the market. So I don't know if we want to mandate that because
We could put a statement of encourage. The developers encouraged to create a certain percent of the units with bedrooms and full baths on main living level or something along those lines. We could certainly put that in here as a statement.
And, having area upstairs, if anybody could put in one of those stairways that, the seat that goes up, or,
There are people who I know who have trouble going up a flight of stairs but are not ready to use one of those elevators, and we shouldn't require them to use an elevator. I just think that, my personal situation, I'm fit enough to go skiing, so all right. I could go up and down all the stairs you want, but people are afraid, they're not necessarily needing that right now. If I was moving into one of these facilities, I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow, but I'm now thinking that as I get older, I may have trouble going up and down stairs, and so I wouldn't be interested in buying a 2-story place,
Yep.
Okay.
But I do believe that you could work with the developer, when they're in the design stages, you pick out, they have a model for the different units. You can work with the builder to say, I want to make sure you accommodate me. I want to have first floor living.
Yeah, but I might be the second, third, or fourth owner of the place that's been built 10 years ago, so.
Say it again?
You're not always the first owner.
Well, then you gotta,
I guess I'd go with the language that Mr. Slipe suggested.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, I'm just wondering, just by looking at these, the SRDs that we've already passed, are you aware of any that are 2-floor living? Maybe
I think
Quarry
it's
Brook 1 and 2.
Quarry Brook Village, yes. I think Quarry Brook Village would be the only one I can come up with, because Shady Brook is all single level, correct? I know there's some attached units there, but they are single levels.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think only Quarry Brook would have some.
okay. I believe Summerwood is 1 floor.
Yep, Summerwood, Podunk Ridge, all those are one floor.
Yep, okay.
And I think we only have two that have community facilities. That would be Podunk Ridge and then the one across the street, T-Berry Estates. I think those are the only two that have over 20 units required to have a
Yeah.
clubhouse.
Okay. Okay, I'll move on. That's, that was a typo Steve brought forward, page 31. That was cleaning up. Page 34 was a cleaning up item under definitions. Which I think was a good change. The abutting definition. Whoops. And I think that's all I had for the zoning reg changes. So now we're at the part where do we close the public hearing? Is there any other input or discussion we need from the public regarding this?
I don't see that.
If not,
I move we close the public hearing.
okay, we have.
Second.
Motion to, and second to close the public hearing. Any discussion, question, comments? Michelle, anything?
No, and this is on the zoning text amendments. Is that correct, item number 1?
Right. Correct. Okay, so hearing no other comments, all those in favor of closing the P and Z sponsored text amendment, item 1, say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, now we're on PZC sponsored subdivision text amendment. And I'll just turn to Michelle, see if you have any.
Again, I provided you with a document. I don't really think there was much at all in this document based on our last public hearing. The only thing, I should say, there was a couple of corrections. Under the page 4 and 5, under the fee in lieu of for subdivisions, one of the suggestions was that possibly rather than paying a lump sum fee when you get an approval, that you pay it as lots were sold. So I did add some language in there in green to do that, similar to how we do an open space fee. So that's pretty much the new language that was added, other than cleaning up some errors from the first version. So.
Okay. All right.
I didn't follow where we were looking.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to it. Yeah, do you want to repeat that?
Sure, okay, again, if you look at on page, I think it's page 5, the green text up at the top, I offered some wording for how a fee would be collected. So we have the formula of how we create the fee in a subdivision, and then the original was what you would pay the fee at the time of Mylar filing or before building permits. This suggestion here is that you would pay the fee at the time of the certificate of occupancy for that lot, so it becomes an encumbrance on the lot. It's pretty easy to track that way. We put something on the land records and we're able to, and it makes it so that a developer doesn't have to come up with a fee all up at once. Only language that was added to this.
Okay. So at this time, I'll turn to the public. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of these PCC-sponsored subdivision text amendment, please step forward. Hearing none. Anybody like to speak against or have questions or concerns about the PCC-sponsored subdivision text amendment? Please step forward. Hearing none. We'll turn to commissioners. Commissioner Bernstein. Commissioner Carey. Commissioner Dexter.
No comment.
Commissioner Wagner.
I just had a comment about when lots are created versus approved on page 3,
Yep.
section H there.
Section 8.
Well, it'd be,
So we would put approved instead of created,
yeah,
and we put the date, yeah,
and wherever that works through in the language.
yep.
That's it.
Oh, that is on the middle of the page, H. Inclusionary zoning requirements effective for new housing units created. We would, right, Steve, right there?
What page do you want?
Page 3.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Foley? Commissioner LeBlanc? Commissioner Viteri?
I just had a quick question. On page 4, B, at the very top there, it says the subdivision contains one affordable unit for each 6 lots proposed. If there's 8 lots proposed, does that go to 2? Or only if you get to 12, does it go to 2?
What's the math?
We had said we were rounding them up.
Right.
For multifamily. Again, this gets back to the question of whether or not you want to get units out of your subdivision regulation or if you want to collect the fee in lieu of. Because this is assuming that you want to get lots.
And subdivision is referring to houses.
Correct.
So I believe the proposal was to accept a fee in lieu of, but the
Yeah.
language from the lawyer.
The town
allowed-
attorney wanted to see if you wanted the option, so he provided language giving you the option to accept the fee, or in the case if you wanted to accept a housing unit, be able to do that. I think we're finding it to be a little bit complicated, the housing unit part of it.
Yeah,
In single-family housing.
yep.
So if we're not going to do that, then this really wouldn't apply. In other words, we'd only be collecting a fee in a subdivision, we wouldn't collect the unit.
Okay, I still don't see what you do if you have 8 lots, but I'll defer.
You would go to the table below, the table that's there, right, on page
Right,
4? You would
right.
apply 8 lots through that table, depending on what zone you're in.
Okay, so then that wording isn't
Yeah,
necessary.
You'd come up with a
Okay.
fee, you'd calculate a fee rather than creating an affordable lot calculation.
Okay,
So, and that table is on page 4. And it does go down further and bring down examples of how it works and how much money would be generated. And in the bottom examples,
The battle example, the 10-lot subdivision, for example.
okay. No, the only thing I was saying is, so if somebody has 8 lots and they have one affordable lot, does that mean they have to go to pay in lieu of? Or because they're still within the one for every 6, that you
Yeah,
don't have
what
to?
we're saying is that we're not going to let you offer an affordable lot. So in other words, if you are creating 8 lots, you're going to have to pay a fee. We're not going to take affordable lots.
If I have 8 lots and one of them's affordable, that means I have to pay a fee?
every lot in the development would have to pay a fee.
Over 3 lots, correct.
My math degree must have failed me here. I still don't get.
Okay.
I'll clarify it with you offline.
Commissioner Cavagnero?
I have no comment on this. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm going to go through, I just want to make sure I address all my proposed changes. On page 3, 5, and it says B, but I believe, it's B in red because the B and C above are struck. So the red one, like a third of the page down, where it talks about bank checks and certified checks. And on the second line, end of the second line, it says the town will release the monies, and in parentheses, and interest earned. I believe it just needs to say additional language, once authorized by the PZC upon completion of any outstanding items. So I'd just like to see that in there to complete that sentence. A little bit further down the page, where it says H1, and then you have subsection A, it says when required. I think that's a little bit out there, and I think we can get our point across without those two words there. In that same paragraph at the end, we had talked about, in the other regulations, the last sentence is, the commission may authorize a direct donation to another entity to support development of affordable housing project elsewhere in South Windsor. Again, I think that should be struck and taken up by a housing committee, not by us in the regulations. Further down on the page, D, which is the last paragraph, and it states if the subdivision approval for which the in lieu fee provided expires without construction of any housing units, the fee in lieu of shall be returned to the fee payer at the fee payer's written request. And I'm just wondering, Michelle, if that needs to have with interest earned. Maybe we could put that.
Why would we give the interest back? I mean, to me, that's a fee of us processing it for all those years.
I'm not sure, I'm asking.
I wouldn't recommend we give the interest back.
Because I know we, unlike bonds, and is it bonds that we,
Correct, yeah.
okay. I was asking if
You know,
if it's a
I think
legal
I
issue
think
or
it goes
not.
into a different type of account. The reason we give bonds back is the type of accounts it's going
Yep.
into. I could check with our finance director, but I think this would be going more into, you know, a town account, not a bank account to earn interest like the other ones do. The banks our bank checks for bonds are put into an interest earning account specifically for that reason. I don't believe that this would go into the same account. But let me verify with our finance director.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, on page 4, there's a highlighted part where it says public, suggested eliminating units in subdivision, only allow fees. I think that's something that we talked about agreeing to, and I just want to confirm that, which would eliminate H.1.2 as being a possibility. And H.1.2,
Get into the exceptions. It starts at the bottom of the page and comes over to the next page. Starts with exceptions.
the bottom on what page?
On the bottom of page 3. Right? It starts with, 2 starts with exceptions, and then it comes over to page 4.
Right, okay,
So we strike that out, because again, we're not talking about getting units with subdivisions. So that would go away.
Okay.
We're talking about getting a fee only.
So need to clean up the language in H1.
Yeah, I'll have to go through, Stephen, anywhere we have a reference to an either/or, I'll just make it be cleaned up. Yeah, I'll look at that.
Okay. And I believe that came from a suggestion from Counselor Kozakowski. Okay. I'll let that go. We'll get through a lot of pages here. I believe that's all I had to point out. So, Commissioner Viteri.
Go back to page 3 on H1A. It says, when a subdivision or re-subdivision creates 3 or more lots, a fee in lieu is required unless affordable units are provided in accordance with section K2B. What's section K2B?
Microphone, please.
It's a typo, it should say H2B, which is the part we're eliminating. So, in other words, the part below where we gave the exceptions.
H2B, not KB.
Yeah, it should say H2B,
2B.
but we're eliminating H2B because we're not going to allow that.
So then we get rid of that paragraph that
Correct.
says unless affordable units are, okay,
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
okay.
Yep.
That
That's
takes
part
away
of the
the
cleanup I'll
confusion
need
I
to take care of.
Okay. Commissioners, is there any other items that we need to review, discuss? Okay, if that's it, then, Michelle, is there any reason not to close the public hearing?
No,
Commissioners, any reason not to close the public hearing? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing at 9:16 PM, and we'll move on to our next item. We have PZC-sponsored zoning text amendment, which is, we talked about possibility of having a 4-month extension, and in crunching all our numbers and bringing this backwards from an end date forward, one thing we didn't account for, and we had a brief reminder of it yesterday and today, is if we have a snow date, that could really screw up our schedules as far as completing our tasks in the time that we have. Yeah, winter's over, okay. But this zoning text amendment was possibly proposed for 4 months. And I'm going to do what I always do first, is when we get on a new item, I'm going to turn to our town staff, our Director of Planning, Michelle Leip.
so what I can do for the commission is, based on comments I heard tonight, is I can certainly clean up the drafts that we have and have those ready for you. We are scheduling an executive session and a special meeting next Tuesday night. Have those ready for you to act on next Tuesday night. If you recall, next Tuesday night is kind of our drop dead to be able to meet the legal time frame to get the moratorium lifted and have new regulations in place. What I might recommend doing is giving ourselves maybe a 2-week breathing room. So in the event that something cancels our meeting next Tuesday, we don't end up in a pickle and not have our regulations in place in time. So my recommendation might be that you might extend it out 2 weeks, just to give us 2 meetings to get the regulations adopted that we're talking about adopting. That's certainly, it's on your agenda for action in our regular meeting, so something you could take up then if you wanted to do something like that. Again, not for any other reason, not to delay things, but really just to cover us in case we end up where we have to cancel a meeting.
Yep. And just to refresh the commission's memory, our moratorium on housing ends March 27th.
Yeah.
And then you back up the 15-day notice of when we have, our approval will be based
12th.
on that 15-day notice. It really
the
doesn't
pub-
leave us, pardon me? Right, publication date, but microphone, just so, because you weren't on when you were saying that.
It's 15 days from the date it gets published.
Correct. So, I'm just trying to reinforce the need to put something in place. And if we end up deliberating longer, it's something that we could always extend further. But if we're going to do it, I think now would be as good a time as any to do like a 2-week extension. So again, this is the public hearing, this isn't deliberations, but I'm just bringing that point forward. And I will do what we always do, I'll turn to the public. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on the PZC-sponsored zoning text amendment, either in favor or against? Please step forward.
Hi. For the record, Ben Tripp, Director with the Metro Realty Group, 34 Avondale Road in West Hartford. So I just wanted to point out that as an affordable housing developer, there's specific timelines, deadlines that we're required to meet when we're applying for financing from the state. And it sounds like we're working toward a shorter potential extension of the moratorium. I would be very concerned at 4 months being able to, at that point, start the application process and being able to get an application approved with all the various commissions in town and also submit to the state in time for the next round of funding. So I just, clearly the primary goal here seems to be to introduce additional affordability in town. And so I just, given that sort of constraint that I and other affordable housing developers would be working toward it. If there is some need to extend longer than the 2 weeks, perhaps if there's some way to prioritize the MAHC or the zones that clearly require developments that are defined as assisted housing under 8-30G. But again, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, that's something like that I think is attainable. At 4 months, we're out probably in August or September, and I would get concerned about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak either in favor or against the zoning text amendment to extend the residential moratorium? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none, we'll turn to commissioners. Commissioner Cavagnaro.
Thank you. The only comment I have on this is that while I'm not in favor of extending it by 4 months, I do agree if we have to extend it by 2 weeks, I'm fine with that, and I'm willing to vote for that if that's what it means. But I think anything longer than probably 3 or 4 weeks is just not something I'd be willing to vote for. But like I said, if we have to do a couple extra weeks, that's fine. But other than that, yeah, that's just where I stand on that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Viteri.
Yeah, I was initially not in favor of extending it at all, but after listening to Michelle, I'll go along with 2 weeks. If it turns out that we have 3 blizzards in the next 3 weeks, we could always extend it again. But for right now, I'd be okay with 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner LeBlanc.
Yeah, I have to agree. Seems like we're closing in on our target here. If needed, next time around, I'd be in favor of sending it somewhat, but 4 months seems excessive to me. But I think we're near the end.
Okay, Commissioner Foley.
No comment.
Commissioner Wagner.
I don't think it's easy to extend it again because of the process of putting forth yet another, it'll be another text amendment. So, I mean, if we're super confident we can make it with 2 weeks, I'm all for it. But if we've got any doubt, then I'd say let's do 4 weeks. If we finish early, more power to us. You can't go, at the end of 2 weeks, you don't have time to make another text amendment.
Do you want to direct a question to town staff?
Well,
Or,
how confident are we that we can do it with a 2-week extension?
It's assuming, I can get you regulations to review by next week, so I'm comfortable getting that. We have a meeting scheduled next week, you have a meeting scheduled the week after. I'm pretty confident you could do that, but if you want to put in a buffer, you can put in 4 weeks.
When do we actually have to act on the,
You'd have to act on next Tuesday without any extension to meet our timetable.
when do we have to act on an extension if we think we need it? Tonight?
Well, I would recommend that you act on it tonight, because for the same reason that I'm concerned that next Tuesday might not happen. If you need to act on it next Tuesday, you don't have a meeting, you don't have an opportunity to act on it. So I'd encourage you to act on something tonight, whether 2 or 4 weeks, whatever you're comfortable with. I fully intend to have you something to act on next week. It just, again, having a snowstorm that made us almost cancel a meeting made me pause a little bit and think we should probably have a
I mean,
contingency.
it sounds like there's a good chance we won't actually use any of the extension. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Right, now, 2 weeks gives us a little buffer, 4 weeks is a little more comfortable. I don't know,
You
I
can
guess
set
when
an
we're in
effective date. When you adopt your things, you're going to set an effective date.
Hmm.
So if that effective date, comes in quicker than the effective date of your extension, you'll have regulations in place. So in other words, if you put them out 4 weeks and we do them next week, we could still have them effective 2 weeks after that.
all set?
I guess I'd go with 4 weeks just to be extra careful.
Okay.
I agree with Steve.
Wait, it's my
Okay.
turn.
Well, let's go
I
with
agree with Steve.
Commissioner Dexter.
No, it makes a lot of sense to go for.
Commissioner Carey?
I agree with Steve and Stephanie.
Commissioner Bernstein?
I'm good with 2 weeks or 4 weeks, nothing beyond that.
Okay. And I'm good with a maximum of 4 weeks also. So if there's
Take that up
no,
later. I said we could take that up in deliberation and
right,
set a date.
if there's no other comment and town staff is fine with it, closing the public hearing, we'll close the public hearing at 9:28, and we'll move on to our next item of business. Michelle, I don't have my bylaws in front of me. When are our meetings up until now? Is it 9:30 or 10?
You did 9:30. Hold on.
Thinking.
He's right, it's 10 o'clock. It was 10 o'clock.
Is it 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure because I,
When Peter's up here, we're just gonna leave half an hour.
I didn't fall asleep tonight yet.
are we definitely 10?
I'll leave it to you, your judgment.
We are 10, okay. Then, you'll hold on a minute, Peter. I will call the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning for February 28th, 2023 to order. Our first item on our agenda is public participation. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on something that is not on our agenda? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none, we'll move into our minutes approval. I just had a couple minor typos. Other than that, I would agree to approving the minutes by consensus. If anybody, it's just a couple words that were duplicated. Other than that, I mean, it's. Okay, so. Okay, so these minor changes we'll give to Caitlin, and we'll approve the minutes by consensus. Agreed? Okay, thank you. Our next item is new business, application 23-01, Miller Heights subdivision. It's a submission. And good evening, Mr. Damali.
I can do this, Chairman Pasconis, I can do this in 30 seconds, or I can give you a little bit longer one. I'd rather do the 30-second, which is just you approved.
I would appreciate the 30-second one.
Okay, good. In January, you approved, last January, a year ago, you approved a special exception for an interior lot in a subdivision, which is creating one new lot, which was the interior lot. So we ended up with two lot, and that effect was two-lot subdivision called Miller Heights. So you approved the special exception, you approved the subdivision. We get a couple of 90-day extensions recorded. We didn't record the Mylars in the time frame. The pins are already set. Everything else is pretty much in order. Draft conservation easement is in place, as well as a street tree easement. So we're ready to go. We just missed that deadline. So we'd like to have you reapprove it. I can get into details about the subdivision, or you can just say we're good and approve it, reapprove it, because it was, I believe, unanimously approved.
I move we
wooded lots.
reapprove application 23-01P.
I second it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to give our town staff the opportunity to present a report before we do that.
That's fine. Yeah, so this is just really to correct a filing, missing of a filing of a Mylar. The special exception for the interior lot is in place, so it is really just the subdivision that needs to be put back in place. The house was removed. If anybody's gone by the site, you'll notice that the house was removed from that location, and so there would be two houses built towards the back, if you recall. Other than that, I would recommend we approve it with all the previous approval conditions, which I think are.
One change, if I may add, just the shared easement. There's no need for shared easement. The shared part of the driveway is only in the right-of-way. It's not on the lots. So if you could remove that one provision.
Which,
So that's a change.
Otherwise, just approve it the way it was. That's fine.
okay, that is number 12 on the approval conditions.
You don't need it because it doesn't apply to this project.
Pardon me?
It doesn't apply because the shared driveway, it's a shared driveway only within the Miller Road right-of-way. As soon as you hit the lots, it becomes separated driveways.
Yeah.
So we don't need a shared driveway easement. That's all.
Well, I guess the point I would want to make is you're only allowed one driveway cut onto Miller Road. So it's
That's
a
right.
shared driveway. Whether or not there's an easement required, I guess, is depending on how it's designed, but it is required to be a shared driveway
Yeah, it is.
So-
Yeah.
Okay.
by requirements.
So it's really not an issue, correct?
We're just not doing an easement because we don't need one. But it is a shared driveway, that's correct.
Okay. Michelle, I'm going to defer to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, you could eliminate item number 12. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So whoever makes that motion should,
You already have a motion. So I'll agree to the change to my motion.
okay. Do we need to, with the,
So basically, you're approving with all the previous approval conditions that were
Minus-
listed there, minus the shared driveway easement.
okay,
Yes.
okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Questions, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we have our next item, which is application 18-23P, 150 Sullivan Avenue.
Yeah,
Michelle?
Phil Tarsinis apologizes. He was not feeling well. He would have joined you tonight. This is a 5-year request extension. This was approved back in 2018. Though he's just started construction, it is at the end of the 5 years. So I'd recommend approval with all his previous approval conditions you know, bonds and everything are in place. It's just really giving them another 5 years to get the buildings constructed.
Okay, and if anybody needs to see it, the letter is attached to our agenda. It's like our third physical page.
It was originally approved June 12th of 2018.
Yeah, okay. So,
Motion.
you've heard the proposal. What's the pleasure of the commission?
Make a motion to extend the site plan approval for 5 years for 18-23P application at 150 Sullivan Ave, and that would go to June 12th, 2028?
Correct.
All right.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes unanimously.
You're like
There
a
was a little
model
eye under
efficiency.
my breath there. Okay. Our next item is application 23-05P, Town of South Windsor Rec Department. I see we have two people to represent the Rec Department. Good evening.
Good evening. All right, for record, my name is Molly Keys, Director of Parks and Recreation for the town.
John Caldwell, Superintendent of Parks.
So we're here tonight just to gain approval for our site plan for the splash pad. So we came here probably about 4 months ago to talk about the project. So we're just really just here for approval. But to give a better visual than just a site plan, we have a rendering of what the splash pad will look like when complete. Just want to show that. It's not it's just a nice little animation. No sound or anything. Yep, so it'll be nature themed. There's different touch, motion activated functions, but it's fully accessible and it's different levels. So that way the accessibility for the youth of varying abilities and sizes and ages can all play together. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome. So I just wanted to show that for everyone for the record of what it'll actually look like when complete. And we'll just, it is pretty late, so we'll just open it to any questions or any thoughts on the site, and yeah, we'll answer whatever you have.
Okay. If that completes your presentation, we'll turn to our town staff, our Director of Planning, Michelle Light.
Thank you. Just a few comments. So this is the site plan approval for the splash pad. You did see an 8-24 referral earlier, or actually late last year regarding this. So this is going to be built in front of the Boundless Playground at the community center. So it's between the Boundless Playground and Nevers Road, kind of in the area where the farmer's market used to be generally. It's roughly a 50 by 50 pad. I'm not sure. I was scaling it off of your old drawing, so maybe larger, maybe smaller.
It's roughly 60 by 70 round numbers.
Okay.
So 1,600 square feet just for the pad and 1,800 with our walkway area around it.
So there will be a walkway that will come from the existing parking area down to the splash pad that will be accessible. There is going to be a decorative fence that will be between the splash pad and Nevers Road so that people won't walk up from the Nevers Road sidewalks into the splash pad area. And the area which they used to use for overflow parking for the farmers market would be overflow parking for this in the event they needed additional parking. This will be subject to discharging into the town sewer system, so WPCA will be reviewing this application as well. Jeff Doolittle has reviewed the latest plans and will work with design professionals that are doing the drawings, and John and his crew on the final designs. There's some grading tweaks and things like that that's being requested by staff, but all things that we'll work out with Recreation Department. Other than that, there are no other staff comments. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions, comments, concerns?
I thought it was on here, it was up there.
Commissioner's asking if there's drawings.
We actually have it here, but it does, for some reason, it's not.
Yeah, we have it digital, but it's just not, it's
not
showing
up
for
there.
us, but it's not up here.
You gotta swipe it, like it's a double dual monitor.
How many do you have? Okay, this,
One in front of you there.
one for Commissioner Cavagnaro.
Swipe, let me swipe this thing.
I just,
Oh, there it is.
there we go.
See, I got all kinds of shit.
Oh, look at that.
Huh?
I didn't know you wouldn't be able to get that on.
No, I got it up.
Okay. So to the right is your parking lot, if you can see that, and there's the walkway coming down. Nevers Road is on the far left.
Yeah, that's the crosswalk at Nevers Road over by Collins Crossing.
Okay.
The fence is shown on the drawing on the left. It's actually almost L-shaped. It's a cast iron, it's not cast iron, it's a steel industrial commercial fence that somewhat surrounds the boundless, not the boundless playground, the splash pad to keep traffic from going towards Nevers Road. And then there's, if you go up the screen some, there's a large wooden, wood rail fence that we use in town. And that separates basically any overflow parking from the splash pad itself. That's where the overflow parking comes in from the community center, and there's already a curb cut that exists there.
Okay, any questions, comments, concerns, commissioners? Commissioner Cavagnaro.
I do have two comments. Thank you so much for coming in and presenting this. I guess part of my first question was answered on if there would be a pathway to the splash pad, but now seeing the location of it, I guess a question or a comment I do have is, I think analyzing it at the bottom right of any of the maps really, you'll see that that is where the current playground is. I'm just trying to envision, kids making their way from the playground to the splash pad. They're not going to take the sidewalk all the way up to the parking lot and go all the way and follow the 5-foot concrete sidewalk all the way back down to the splash pad. I think we are going to see a foot pattern or a footpath on grass from the side or from the playground to the splash pad. So I guess my first question is if you guys are willing to have a second pathway from the playground to the splash pad to sort of prevent a grass footpath from occurring.
That's one of the things that we looked at, but I think a lot of colleges and a lot of facilities now are letting the public find the footpath, and then I think if they actually did find a natural footpath, I think then we would like to add a path in after. We don't really know where they're going to come from there. That's the problem, and I got a feeling they're going to come from all areas of there. There's a sidewalk on the entire outside boundary of the boundless playground, so they can come down from any of those entrances or exit areas, which is the entire boundless playground, to the splash pad. So, if they do find a natural path, it'll wear itself out, and I think we'll kind of let the public figure that one out.
All right, thank you. And the only other comment I think, or request I have, which I think this is something that I would like to see, I'm not sure about anyone else. I tend to have a good memory of going to Nevers Park, bringing my bike, parking at the pavilion, and riding around either the gravel or the concrete pathway. I'm trying to imagine myself, maybe when I was 5 years old, if there was a splash pad, maybe I would have rode my bike to the splash pad. So I think my only request here is if you guys are willing to put up a bike rack. So rather than a bike sitting on the ground that someone could take, there's a bike rack where I could sort of tie it up with my lock, for example, and it's a little bit more protected.
Yeah, we plan on utilizing one of the bike racks from the South Windsor Walk and Wheelways. We have an extra one that we kind of have put aside right now, a brand new one, so we're going to use that one down there. It'll be down near the splash pad, over by the sidewalk area, so if they do ride, they'll be able to put their bike very close to the splash pad.
Awesome, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Just a quick, is this going to be at certain hours of operation, or
Yeah, normal operations will pretty much mimic VMP, which is Memorial Day to probably the end of September, start at about 11 a.m. and finish at 7 p.m.
Oh, okay.
It's weather permitting, and obviously, we have the ability to control it. So if it's a really hot day and we have to open it earlier, we can, and close it if we need to. So we do have that remote capability to do so. We have the ability to also leave it open a little bit later. That's why we said probably late September. Whereas VMP, we close September 4th. So just because it does stay warmer out, but we will not have a lifeguard on duty. So that's really the main difference for us at that facility.
I'm just curious, is there like a drinking fountain as a part of this or anything, or? Because I could see the kids just, never mind, that's my own evil mind going.
Bring their own water bottles, similar as the playground.
Got it?
Anyone else have any? Commissioner LeBlanc?
Yeah, it's a quick question. I'm all for this, of course, but how is it maintenance-wise to take care of this? And what's the weight on the town?
You know, I think because there's no lifeguard required there and we don't have to staff it, we don't have chemicals to deal with, I think that most towns, it's not staffed by anyone. I know, we've been to a few other towns. It's pretty simple around the outside of it. We're not going to add a lot of shrubbery or any trees like that. There's going to be some benches, some shade structures to it. We have talked about some solar lighting around it just for a nighttime kind of make sure there's no vandalism or anything like that. I did have looked into some commercial solar lighting. But I don't think it's going to be a big burden at all to us. You know, it's not going to be something that's open in the winter. We mow there already. We'll have to be just a little bit more careful when we mow and, you know, not a certain way we do things, but I don't think it's going to be a big impact hardly at all.
Understood. Thanks, John.
Commissioner Foley? Commissioner Wagner?
No.
Commissioner Dexter?
I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention I don't like frogs at all. Is there an alternative to the frog?
Yeah, we can use a toad.
Commissioner Carey?
No comment.
Commissioner Bernstein?
Yeah, I just can't wait till you add a Dippin' Dot station to it.
If you'd like to work it, we would love to have it.
Could you repeat the hours again?
So 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. approximately.
Memorial Day to late September.
September to mid-September?
Mid to late September. It just depends on the weather patterns. It's been very unpredictable.
Okay. All right. I got nothing else. Commissioner Cavagnaro?
Thank you. I did think of one other question, and this doesn't, it sort of relates to the splash pad, but it more relates to the area that it contains. I know in the past that area has been used for overfill parking for, you know, festivities and other events and festivals that happen at Nevers Park. I'm just curious if Parks and Rec has sort of determined where that overfill parking will go at Nevers Park, or if you're expecting, you know, not enough spaces, I should say.
We will utilize the overflow parking that is going to be just, I guess it's going to be north of the upper rail fence that's up here, right? About, oh, this is gentle. This fence here is the wood rail fence that we use, guardrail fence. The community center is just above that and to the right. And so that there's going to be an area of grass area that's an overflow parking. That's all we plan on using. I really do not want to kit any cars or anything like that near the splash pad. There's going to be a water line, an electrical line going to that. There'll be an electrical shed and also a small water cabinet that'll contain all the valves for the splash pad, which will be fenced in, but that wood rail fence is going to go all the way to Nevers Road. So we're going to try and keep all traffic off of that area. I know you're talking about like the Strawberry Festival or things like that.
Which we're going to have the festival and overflow parking is really where the farmer's market is as well.
Right.
So we utilize that space.
We did that last year. It worked out very well for them.
Awesome. That answers my question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions, comments? If not, a motion would be in order.
Like a motion to approve application 23-05P, Town of South Windsor Recreation Department.
Do you have your sheet.
Find out. Thank you.
The agenda says 05, but on this one it says 06. So the agenda's correct. Okay.
Okay. 05.
These are all standards, all right? Yeah. These are all standard provisions, all right?
Okay, well,
Want to read them?
approve with the standard conditions, 1 through whatever?
Yeah, they approved standard conditions 1 through 6. There's nothing additional to add to that for application 23-06P.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, our next item on our agenda is PZC-sponsored text amendment. Right, we closed the public hearing. Michelle, I think you have your direction as far as what we need for language on that. Maybe a couple little questions, but,
Yeah, no, I do, thank you, yep.
so we'll be looking to move that forward on March 7th.
At your next meeting, correct.
Okay. Commissioners, is there anything else regarding this that somebody would like to?
Do we want to do something on the moratorium extension for?
Right, well, that's a little bit further
Oh,
down,
okay.
right?
You're not there yet, I'm sorry. Okay.
Correct, I'm not ending the meeting yet.
Yep.
Okay, so that takes care of item 4. Item 5 is the PZC proposal to opt out of provisions of Public Act 21-29. And I'll turn to our Director of Planning, Michelle Webb.
You know, why don't we put that on next week, and you can do it when you do your other text amendments? If
Okay.
you wanted to, if you decide you want to do that, that was part of our public hearing to do that, but,
Do we have time? I just want to make sure.
oh, yeah, we have time on that, yep.
Okay. Commissioner Cavagnaro.
I do have a quick comment on this, so that sort of backs up why it sort of should be on next week. After reviewing Public Act 2129, on page 15 of the Public Act, it states that subsections A through D, if we try and opt out of it, or at least the deadline to opt out of subsections A through D, the deadline is January 1st, 2023. I know we talked about this earlier, so I double-checked 2129, but it does say on page 15 that we cannot opt out of this after January 1st, 2023.
I'm not aware of that language, so.
Yeah, I was under the impression that it was only accessory apartments. I can look at, well, you know, I think we should still go forward with it. If that's what the commission's intent is to opt out of it, we should make the motion to opt out of it. And, you know, we've been in a moratorium, so nobody could apply anyhow for our regulations, and we're updating our regulations for the apartments. And there is some discussion of that language and whether or not that language may get changed again. So, but I would still go forward with opting out if that's what you want to do.
Okay.
There's been some mixed information on that coming through the planning community, but again, I would opt out if that's what your intention is.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? I believe Michelle's going to check that out, and
Yep.
we'll have it on our agenda for the next meeting. Alan, I appreciate you bringing that forward. Okay. Our next item is our PCC-sponsored subdivision text amendment. Again, Michelle, I think, documented all the changes to the language that we're going to need to move forward with this at our March 7th meeting. Anything else on this item?
No, so what I will plan on doing is giving you basically a red line text for the next meeting, kind of taking all the other colors out of it.
Yep.
So it'll be black and red.
Okay. Any new language will Will there be new language?
Well, anything red is considered new language. So it's either strike through, that we're changing language, or red is new language.
Okay, so basically you're taking out all the red, correct, or
No,
no?
I'm taking out any of the green or the highlighted yellows I had in there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to distinguish if we have any changes from today versus,
Okay, I can put changes from today in another color. I'll do that. Okay, yeah, I'll make sure you can tell what we changed based on this here.
however's easiest for you.
Yeah, I'll try to make it clearest.
Okay, good. Anything else on this one? Hearing none, we'll move on to our next, which is our PCC-sponsored zoning text amendment extension. What I heard tonight was do a comfortable 4 weeks.
Okay, so I prepared some language along those lines, and what we would do is we would be adopting 4 weeks with a maximum of April 23rd, that's 4 weeks from our current expiration of our moratorium. The effective date would be March 26th, which is the day before our moratorium expires, so that we're covering ourselves. But when you do adopt your new regulations, you know, one of the things you're going to be doing is taking out this section that put the moratorium in place in the first place. So once you adopt that and put an effective date, that'll be when your regulations go into place. So in other words, even though we're going to put this out there 4 weeks, if you adopt something next week, we can shorten the time frame the moratorium's in place. If that makes any sense. I see the ladies understand in here. So let me give you this language. Who's brave enough to do it?
4, 6, 7.
But those are the dates, the explanation of the dates.
I think once it gets to somebody who's going to make a motion. The chair does not make motions. Commissioner Wagner.
I move that we adopt the PZC-sponsored residential moratorium extension. The PZC proposed to extend the moratorium for 4 weeks to continue updating regulations until April 23, 2023. The Planning and Zoning Commission finds that the zone text is in conformance with the Town Plan of Conservation and Development. The effective date of the zone text amendment is March 26, 2023. So let me just rephrase the first item. The PZC extends the moratorium for 4 weeks to continue updating regulations until April 23, 2023.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Bonds, what do we have here?
You have no bond.
We have no bonds. Okay. Michelle, do we have any old business?
No, we do not.
Okay. I'll just remind the commission that there is an event coming up later in March, Caitlin. If you would like to attend that event, you have to let Caitlin know by mid-March.
The event is March 23rd, so
Right, and you have to let them know by the 21st, correct?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
A little earlier would be better for us, but yes, but the 21st.
in the next 2 weeks, that was part of your package. Other than that, no other business, a motion to adjourn would be in order?
I think we already are adjourned. It is past 10 p.m.
Only by that clock, not by mine.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion passes.